We are facing a national emergency, not only because the climate is changing, but because the living systems that regulate that climate, protect our homes and feed our people, are breaking down here in one of the most nature-depleted nations on Earth.
The way the science is going at the moment, we're going to see a rise of about 2 degrees centigrade or so by the middle of this century. But there's now a small but very real risk that we could hit 4 degrees centigrade by the end of this century. Now, the prospects of 3 and 4 degrees centigrade of warming are absolutely dire. And there will be no real economy to talk about. There's no reduction in GDP. We'll be looking at systemic collapse.
By 2050, 1 in 4 properties, 8 million in England, will be at risk of flooding. And new research by my group shows that UK winter rainfall has increased by 10% since 1980 because of the fossil fuels we're putting into the atmosphere. Now, an extra 30 millimetres of rainfall each winter sounds really small, but across the UK, that's 7.3 billion cubic metres of extra water. It's the same as 3 million Olympic-sized swimming pools, with an effect on flooding. This trend is some 25 years ahead of global climate model predictions. Hot, dry summers threaten our water security as well. Many of you will have noticed this year. They overstretch healthcare systems, and they bring a new danger to the UK, wildfires. These now happen on heathlands, forests, even on the edges of cities. And earlier this year, a wildfire in Dorset was so severe that 17 fire services had to respond. UK fire services no longer have the resources to keep the public safe in extreme heat. A record-shattering heatwave in Western North America, huge floods in Western Europe and China, and extreme heat and wildfires in Siberia. Different regions, different hazards, but the same underlying driver, a block jet that traps weather systems.
I'll walk you through why, if we carry on the current trajectory to 3 or maybe 4 degrees of warming later this century, then we'll definitely be in a national emergency, because we'll be at a high level of likelihood of crossing a tipping point in the climate that will make this country a very different place and less habitable place to be. The great overturning, we call it, circulation of the Atlantic. So this red thing is a surface current heading northwards, transporting masses of heat to where we are and giving us our nice, mild, equable climate, especially winters. If you lose the deep water formation, you can tip off this great overturning. We already know this circulation is weakening. We know the dramatic changes in climate that brought to our part of the world. And unfortunately, this circulation can pass and does pass a tipping point in a bunch of the state-of-the-art climate models that we run. I'll just show you an example of one of them. In this one, it's happened at around 2 degrees centigrade of global warming. On the right, you're seeing a remarkable comeback of the Arctic sea ice cover that happens if we cross this tipping point, with the sea ice reaching down to the wash and covering most of the North Sea by February each winter. On the left, there's some information about what the decadal winter climate extremes will be if we've crossed this tipping point. In London, it's minus 20 degrees C and 3 frozen months of the year. And in Edinburgh, it's minus 30 degrees C and 5.5 frozen months of the year. And yet the summers will still be hotter than today, because it's a 2 degrees warmer world, not a 1.4 degrees warmer world. So the seasonality of the UK, the climate, is like nothing we've ever seen before. It's radically increased. We've previously looked at what would this do to some basic things like land use and food production. And the simple version is it eliminates the possibility to grow crops in the UK. But that's possibly the least of our worries, because there'd be a major water security crisis. We calculate that there'd be not enough water from the winters to get through the summers in the southeast of England.
I'm going to tell you about a threat that will affect everyone in this room, every family in this country, and every constituent. A threat for which we are woefully unprepared. And I'm talking about the increasing pressure on global food supplies in the face of accelerating climate change and nature loss. This is what happens when food systems fail. Empty supermarket shelves, people queuing for hours for food, protests and civil unrests. For generations, a stable climate has given us reliable harvests. But that era, as we've heard, is gone. Britain has seen 3 of the 5 worst cereal harvests on record occur this decade. This is Colin Chappell, a 4th-generation arable farmer in Lincolnshire during the flooding of 2023, who said, "I was farming water, I wasn't farming soil. My dad got flooded once in 1981. But since 2000, I've lost count of the amount of times that I've been flooded. He also went on to say, I'll be open and honest. I don't know how we'll get through next year. If I get one more bad year, that's it, we're gone. So one estimate suggests that about a third of the food price inflation that we saw in 2023 was driven by extreme weather events that are now becoming the norm. And when families can't afford to feed their children, societies break down. The UK food executives have warned that the sector is on course for pronounced shortages and business failures, saying, we've reached a moment of threat to our food security like none other we have seen.
My day job is emergencies. I know what an emergency looks like, and I know how you respond to an emergency. And you don't respond to emergencies with talk and homeopathy. You respond with genuine action. Until around 15 years ago, human impacts of climate change weren't even being discussed. And I was part of this commission that made this statement, that climate change was the greatest threat to human health of the 21st century. We were pointing out the risk, but we weren't adequately pointing out the hazard, because I don't think anymore it's about risk. It's about survival. It's about the survival not of future generations, but of my son, who was 20 last Sunday. This is what scares the living daylights out of me, because these sorts of climate impacts drive catastrophic downstream changes, which affect our socioeconomic systems in this sort of way. Without a functioning economy, without food supply available to us, we cannot run a health service, we cannot have health.
Even 5 to 10 years ago, if you'd raised climate change in the MOD, most people would nod politely, move on, with even a couple of top officials telling me, we're exempt climate change. But that has now changed. The MOD is now looking at environmental impacts with a team working on climate security, energy self-sufficiency for our forces, and how they can adapt to a rapidly changing planet. The Chief of Defence Staff is engaged. Other countries and NATO are doing the same, factoring climate into national security. Why? Because the threat picture is shifting faster than we expected and faster than we anticipated. Many of you will know what NATO Article 5 says, an attack on one is an attack on all. But NATO Article 3 stresses the need for each country's ability to withstand and recover from all types of shock, whether they're military, natural disasters, or other crises. Climate change can be thought of as a threat multiplier, making existing threats worse or more frequent and introducing new threats. Climate shocks fuel global instability. When farmers can no longer earn a living, they're recruited by non-state actors. And we saw this in Afghanistan, and we saw this with ISIS in Iraq. Climate impacts make livelihoods impossible in some areas. And you've heard that about how the combination of 50 degrees, which I was fighting in Iraq, and 100% humidity renders the human body impossible to act. I can tell you it is extremely unpleasant, and most of my soldiers couldn't cope with it. And just as an aside, I had no casualties from my battle group of over 1,000 in Iraq from the enemy. We were a successful battle group. But I had 5 returned to UK for heat stroke. And I used in that battle group of 1,000, 250 drips to keep people alive. That was the real killer for my battle group in Iraq. There are only 9 meals between mankind and anarchy.